Our first speaker for this afternoon is Barry Foster. So we all know Barry. He used to be our National Beekeepers Association president. He's a member of the interim Joint Executive Council of Apiculture New Zealand. And he's also the chairman of APNZ Research Focus Group and the Technical Forum Group as well, which monitors EPA chemicals and registrations, pesticides and their effects on honeybees. So this morning, he'll be talking about location, what makes a good apiary site. So I'd just like him, welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, Michelle, for that welcome. My talk this afternoon is on location, what makes a good apiary site. It's an old real estate adage that's been around since about the 1920s. And I'm just going to put it to you, is it applicable to an apiary site? Some elements of it are, but not all. And I think, do I just move this cursor? Yes, there we are. So, location, these are some of the elements that I'll cover in my presentation. Physical characteristics like shelter, water. You heard this morning that an average beehive needs 25 litres of water per annum. There's the physical characteristics around forage, diversity of forage, and of course the flowering calendar, which Trees for Bees has been working on for about 7 years now. And then I'll cover on things like safety, access, flood, fire, theft, nuisance, and then last of all I'll wrap up with some solutions that I'd like to put to you. So the first slide. When you're picking a location for an apiary site, you obviously need to look at the landscape, and what's the landscape telling you? What is the prevailing wind? Bees cannot forage in strong winds, and particularly cold winds from the south. So you need to recognise what the landscape is telling you. Aspect: sun, microclimates, air drainage, water and wind. Bees are creatures of the sun. They need sunlight for a good length of the day. You need those microclimates, the warmth, to get them to come out from the hive and forage over a good length of the day. Preferably the whole arc of the sun, if you like, in a given day, that hives should be exposed to. And in the winter time, now with the low sun, you need that hive to have sunlight. Air drainage: we don't want hives in frost pockets in the bottom of valleys, because once again it affects that microclimate. When I made up this presentation, I made up a dummy hive, and that's a dummy hive at a place called Eastwood Hill Arboretum, just outside of Gisborne. So you'll see this dummy hive on the way through. I think diversity of forage is really important when I pick an apiary site, particularly a wintering site, and really what I'm covering in this presentation is wintering sites. I'm not really focused on your summer sites. So the wintering sites where your hives are there for 40 weeks in the year. So to me, diversity is really important. You may have heard that New Zealand was in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, particularly in relation to our natural forage and our natural fauna and flora. Well, I believe that we are probably getting near that way with our bee forage. As we get better herbicides at taking out those weeds, we get more intensive farming, we're not adding back what we should be doing for our bee forage. The Trees for Bees project is going part way to address that, but a lot more could be done. Bees, of course, as you've heard this morning, need forage to build up their numbers from spring right up to a peak in summer, and then that important autumn forage to build up their vitellogenin, their lipids, and to survive through the winter. So I'll just reiterate that again. Another, extended flowering. I believe a site needs to have, if you can pick a site with extended flowering, or you can plant to that, all the better, because you're going to have forage through adverse weather events and over an extended period. And I put the dummy hive next to a border of rosemary there, which I think is a really good plant because it has extended flowering. And that other photo on the right there, Tagasasti, I love that plant. I've planted it for about the last 20 years. And this is a particular shot of a tree I planted 2 years ago, and I took that photo 1 year ago. That plant is twice the size now, and it's just coming into flower. It's also, to the left of that particular photo, there is a cliff face there. And when this row of plants, they've been planted near that cliff with the idea that it will seed down that cliff, and over a period of time it will help to hold that cliff by the germinations of plants on it. I've done that. I've seen it happen. So I'm looking for win-win situations. The landowner is very happy about that because that is a major slip on his property that can block a creek. Once again, look at the landscape, what the landscape tells you. Wet sites. These are wee, which indicates a wet area. If you put your hives there, it's a nice flat area, but your truck's going to get bogged and your hives are going to get quite mouldy and damp. Furthermore, the creek may flood, and the road in the background there may invite unwanted attention. Who knows in these days? You're probably not going to get much problem with fire in that site there, but once again, if you're in an area where there is plantation forestry or natural forest, you should have third-party insurance. It's just really good business protection, good business sense to have that. I'll add too here at this stage that what makes a good site is a site that's registered and is GPSed with a sure quality, not only to comply with the AFB PMP, but also it adds value to our honey in relation to other honeys on world markets through traceability. So if you're not registering your hives, you're probably actually, in my opinion, shooting yourself in both feet simultaneously. Access. This could be number one for you, if it all depends on your situation. But if you're having to cross a creek in winter, or if you cross a creek in summer and it's impassable in winter, you're not likely to be going back there again while it's difficult to get access to. So hard to get to sites tend to suffer from lack of attention. They don't get that feed, they don't get that attention, so they don't do so well. Actually, just going back to that last slide there, one thing I should mention, flooding. I always look and I talk to my landowners and I ask them, what is the high water mark of the greatest flood in this area on your property in living memory? And quite often they can tell me, and you can find those low areas. You can find within the landscape, look for things like if the bottom two rungs of a 7-wire fence is buried in silt, then something has happened there. We're going to touch on nuisance and consideration in a workshop after this, but once again I popped the dummy hive next to a gate and a set of yards there, and And that would be a bee nuisance there. The flight path would affect traffic in and out of that gate there, and you can get around that through screening. You can put a hives behind, say, that group of trees to the right of that photo there if it worked, or you can find another site, but you're just inviting trouble. This is an example of a solution. This is actually a real site. It's one of my wintering sites. We've just planted a whole row of Michaelia unionensis there, and these are $50 trees. They're about that high. They will be flowering in August, and in 2 years they'll be a nice effective shelter along there. They'll be looking after themselves. So for a bit of an outlay of money, you can build that site into a really nice site. Land use contracts, John Hartnell will be talking about those tomorrow. This is another win-win solution. This is about 200 metres away from one of my wintering sites. It's behind the picture. There's a vineyard down the bottom, and this is the landowner there. Just a month or so, or a few weeks ago, he's planting trees for bees. And this is one of the venues for the Gisborne Food and Wine Festival, which is held in October each year. And there's a hill to the right up behind the photo where they have a marquee and they have live music and, of course, food and wine. So we've planted about 7 or 8 Japanese cherries down towards the sheds in the background there. And then there's a whole avenue of upright tulip trees that go right down that roadway in the background there. And if you think of tulip trees, they're like the flowers in them, they're like little bowls of fruit salad for bees. And they're hung all over the trees, and those are bowls of fruit salad, if you like, of nectar and pollen. Marvellous. And he's absolutely rapt because this is amenity planting. The venue there for that food and wine festival in a few years will be fantastic. He's planting about $80 or $100 trees there. So in the scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, but the impact is huge. Okay. Oh. This is another possible win-win solution. This is a plantation of ground durable hardwoods, various sources outside of Gisborne. The near trees are Globoidia, Eucalyptus globoidia. They flower in the winter. Here's a shot of a Gisborne Trees for Bees trial, started in 2012. We have got 3 years of data on this. We planted trees, as you can see to the left there. We're going to hold off for a couple of more years to let those trees grow, and then we'll start weighing those hives again. Old house sites I find are very good to look at as potential sites for hives. And this is not a wintering site. I have hives to the left of that house. It's a summer site for clover. It's at 610 metres inland from Gisborne. And the trees around to the south, to the left and the background, they shelter from the south and the east. It has all the other elements I've spoken about of air drainage and sun and access. I'd like at this stage just to thank the Trees for Bees team, Dr. Linda Newstrom-Lloyd, Angus McPherson, and all of them, including Karen Rogers and the people at GNS Science. Also the students who have worked in the past at Eastwood Hill, who have really boosted that research program. And I guess the message is to plant more trees around your sites. I believe that if we planted 5 good size trees for bees around each of your permanent apiary sites or wintering sites each year for 5 years, we'd probably go a long way to solve the nutrition problem. Last slide. The perfect site does not exist, but near perfection can be achieved. I'd like to think that this is first light falling on New Zealand. It's taken from halfway up Mount Hikurangi. And I'd like to think that it's an analogy for where we want to go. We want to turn over a new leaf and have a greater and better beekeeping and industry as a result. Thank you.